Right, sadly, this Parsha is the first Parsha that we have the opportunity to be together since the passing of Dayan Ehrentreu, Zatzal, and I thought the first idea should be dedicated to his remarkable legacy and memory, and you'll see why. The pasuk begins in this week's Parsha, Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheva, Vayelech Chorona. Right, and the famous Rashi on the beginning of the Parsha says, Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheva, and then he went to Choron. So why is it necessary to tell us that he left Beersheva? Says Rashi, Vayelech Yaakov Chorona. The pasuk should have just told us that Yaakov went to Choron. V'lomo hizkir Yitziasa. Why does it tell us that he left Beersheva? Elo, says Rashi, Magid sheyitzia tzaddik min hamakom. When a tzaddik leaves a place, oiseration, it leaves a mark. Shebizman she'atzadik be'ir. When a tzaddik is in a city, hu haida, hu ziva, hi hadra. It's the splendor, the beauty, the majesty of this place. Yotze misham, but when he departs the city, pona haida, pona ziva, pona hadra, then it all goes. Now, the Golker asks an interesting question. It's a well-known Rashi, but yesh l'hisbainin, says the Golker, v'chi Avraham v'Yitzchak le'holchem mimakom l'makom. It's not the first time a tzaddik is leaving a town. Avraham and Yitzchak had many travels, many journeys. Why does it say Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheva and teach us this limud, particularly with Yaakov over here? It could have told us this with Avraham, with Yitzchak on their various travels. Why didn't it say with Avraham and Yitzchak the lashon, the expression of Yitzia? So he gives two answers. Here's the first answer. We can turn it two ways. It's telling me a chiddush. Nokat kan Vayeitzei, it tells us here Vayeitzei, ki Avraham v'Yitzchak lehinichu b'makom sheholchu misham tzadik kamoisa. When Avraham and Yitzchak left the place, they didn't leave anyone back in the place where they were at. Pshita she'itziasa masorishim, so it's obvious that if Yitzchak or Avraham were in place A and they leave it, so it's going to make an impact on place A. Aval kan Hari Yitzchak v'Rivka nisharu sham. But in this particular situation, Yitzchak and Rivka were still living in Beersheva. So Sal Kedaitach, I might have thought, Sal Kedaitach Amina she'en Yitziasa Eisereshim, the departure of Yaakov is not going to make such a big impact. You've still got Yitzchak and Rivka living there. Kamash Melon, that the departure of a tzaddik, even though there may be other great tzaddikim there, Kamash Melon, it does leave an impact. And when I came across this Golker, it occurred to me, the Dayan was the Dayan. The Dayan he was majestic, and his level of a Talmud Chacham doesn't need me to be masbidim. But and Baruch Hashem, we're blessed here in London with outstanding Talmidei Chacham and Rabbonim. But still, the point is that the town, the Kehillah feels bereft. The Mamish feels, you feel it. And that's exactly what it's saying. We left Baruch Hashem with great Talmidei Chacham and great tzaddikim, but the Yitzia of a tzaddik leaves an impression despite the caliber of people that are left behind. And then you can explain it actually the other way, says the Golker in the last paragraph. Loima. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. Loima. Shedafka Yitzias shel Yaakov Eisereshim. No, it's Dafka the Yitzia of Yaakov Avinu which leaves an impression. Avalo Yitzias Avraham v'Yitzchak. But not when Avraham and Yitzchak traveled. Because when they traveled, they left with their entire families, and they didn't leave there anybody. And therefore, the place they left, there was no one to appreciate it. Because the wicked people who stayed there, they're indifferent at best, or at worst, they're very relieved when a tzaddik leaves town. They're happy when the tzaddikim leave the town. Because these wicked people are going in a different way. They're like thorns in their eyes, and they argue, there's contention. If you leave behind other tzaddikim and the tzaddik leaves, then who's going to feel it? When I went to Menachem Oval this afternoon, the Dayan, the family, so Dayan David was there. And I remember thought just popped in my mind now. When he was in Vayeitzei Kollel for many years, when he left Vayeitzei Kollel, the whole Vayeitzei Kollel went to the train station to say goodbye to him. Because they feel that someone like David is leaving town. It makes an impression. So therefore, if Yitzchak and Rivka are staying behind, there is a Roshem because they're going to feel the absence, the vacuum of Yaakov Avinu. It's difficult for them when other tzaddikim leave. Because a town with just Yitzchak and Rivka is not the same as a town with Yitzchak, Rivka, and Yaakov. And therefore their leaving was recognizable. Okay, so that's the kliyaka, two ways of explaining this question, why Vayeitzei Yaakov, this limud is specifically told over here as above. Okay, now, the next piece is a fabulous item from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. It's a slightly longer piece, but we'll go through it, and we'll do it in the text itself, because I think it's glorious. And he asked an interesting question. What happens at the beginning of the Parsha? At the end of last week's Parsha, of course, we know we have the brachas with Esav and Yaakov. And Esav finds out that Yaakov slipped in, gets the brachas, and he is fuming. He wants to kill him. So Yaakov has got to get out of town. Begins our Parsha, Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'ersheva Yelech Harana. And he's traveling. Says the pasuk, Vayifka b'makom, the second pasuk I think in the Sedra, Vayifka b'makom, and he arrives at the place, Vayolen sham, and he rests there, Kivo hashemesh, because the sun sets, Vayikach me'avnei ha'makom, Vayosem ershosa, Vayishkov b'makom hahu, and he sleeps. Rashi famously says, why Vayishkov b'makom hahu? Says Rashi, Loshen miut. It's an expression of a miut. We're trying to sort of exclude some other situation. But in this place he slept. But the 14 years where he had been previously, he didn't sleep. Of course, not a sheinas keva, not a proper sleep. You can't live 14 years without sleep. The Gemara says you can't go 3 days without sleep. So he slept. The sheinas arai. One of my rabbis in yeshiva, he only saw his bed on Friday night. I just saw him a few months ago. One of the hidden tzaddikim in Yerushalayim, and he would get up on Shabbos morning, and that was it till next Friday night. In other words, he would sleep on a shtender, he would fall asleep. Now, it's not for the faint-hearted, it's not for you and me, but there are people out there who do this. So for 14 years, Yaakov Avinu didn't have a shenas keva. Because those 14 years he was learning with such intensity. Now, the difficulty is, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, his parents had just sent him to go and get married. But we know that he didn't go straight away to Lavan. The beginning of this week's Parsha, with the whole story where he goes and gets married to Lavan and Rachel and Leah, that actually happened 14 years later. And the question therefore is, how could Yaakov go and learn for 14 years when he was just instructed by his parents to go and get married? It's an interesting thing. And he was learning in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'eva. That's where he went to. Now, what was he doing before that? He was 63 years old. We'll go through the Rabbi Yaakov in a second. But he was 63 years old. What was he doing till now? The answer is he was learning Torah with his father Yitzchak, and before that with his grandfather Avraham. So, what is different about the Torah that he learned with Yitzchak and with Avraham, and the Torah that he felt the need to go to Shem Ve'eva to learn? Why did he do it, and what exactly is the Torah of Shem Ve'eva? Let's go through this Emes Liyaakov inside. It really is a fabulous piece. Okay. Hine, lefi cheshbon zeh, Vayeitzei, it comes out, sheYaakov lo hoya bebeis aviv 36 shana. Yaakov Avinu was away from home for 36 years. Arbes reishana shehoya etzel Shem Ve'eva, because 14 years, as soon as he ran away after the business with Esav and Yaakov, with the brachas, he went to Shem Ve'eva, the yeshiva of Shem Ve'eva. Va'oid esrim v'shnayim shonim, and another 22 years, shehoya bebeis Lavan. 22 and 14 is 36. Chazal moishrim lanu, Chazal are teaching us, shebe'emes ne'enash Yaakov al zeh, Yaakov Avinu was punished for this, shehisrashel b'kibud aveim, that he was lax in his kibud aveim, v'lochein Yosef ne'edar mebeisei esrim v'shnayim shana, and therefore Yaakov was punished, that his son Yosef was hidden away and was taken away for 22 years. But the 14 years that he was in the house of Shem ve'ever, lo nenesh Yaakov. Yaakov wasn't punished. He was only punished for the 22 years that he was in the house of Lavan. Clearly, he says, these 14 years, that he was in the house, in the yeshiva of Shem ve'ever, were so pressing for his spiritual sort of decline, that he had to go to the yeshiva of Shem ve'ever for some personal spiritual reason, that it somehow overrides the kibbud avayim, that he didn't listen to his parents who instructed him to go straight to the house of Beis Lavan to get married. Next paragraph. He was 63 years old. He learned Torah until he was 15 years old when Avram Avinu passed away. And from 15 years old until he was 63, he learned in his father's yeshiva in the house of Yitzchak. Why was it so pressing now for Yaakov, rather than listening to the instructions of his parents, to go to the house of Lavan? Why does he desperately need to go and learn for another 14 years? Even though he was clearly great in Torah, how does that exempt him from the mitzvah kibbud aveim? Than helping out and dealing with his elderly parents. Listen to this mashal. Imagine a father tells his son to go to the store and buy something for him. On the way to the shop, on the way to the store to buy something his father, he slips into a Beis Medrash and he sits and learns for a few hours. Now you've got to learn. Talmud Torah is pushed aside in front of any mitzvah that cannot be done by anybody else. If the father told you to go, you the child to go, so you now have got to go to the shop and buy something. Why? What gives you the right to go into a Beis Medrash and learn for a few hours? And in this case, for 14 years. Next paragraph. To understand the pressing need to go to the yeshiva of Shem ve'ever, we have to understand what was the Torah of Shem ve'ever. It was so qualitatively different to the Torah of Avram and Yitzchak. So listen to this. The Avos, Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov, would sit and learn in yeshiva, and they would disseminate Torah to everybody who would come, to be influenced, to be absorbed by their outlook in life. Turning over, they would learn Torah on a very lofty level, totally protected, totally insulated from the outside environment. They were not affected at all by it. When Sarah saw that Yishmael was badly influencing Yitzchak, just tell Hagar and Yishmael to get out of here. That it's too dangerous to have Yishmael influencing my Yitzchak in this environment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed. Next paragraph. That was not the Torah of Shem ve'ever. But Noshel Noach, who was Shem, of course, was the son of Noach, Sheniflet midar hamabel, who had escaped from the dar hamabel. Nitzel lo rak mimisha hamabel. He had not only escaped from the waters of the flood, elegam misvivasam shel anshe dar hamabel or miashchasasam. But he he's escaped from the degenerate environment that was the dar hamabel. Aver nolad v'chai b'mei dar haflaga. Aver lived in the dar haflaga, which rebelled against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sherotzu livnos migdal v'reish b'shamayim kadei limud b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Eva was not influenced by them, and he remained on his righteous level. Rak Shem ve'Eva, Dafka these two, Shem and Eva, they survived. They were the remnants of the degenerate society before them. V'lo Avram ve'Yitzchak. Avram and Yitzchak didn't live in those times. So it's Dafka Shem and Eva who were able to teach Yaakov how to live with Lavan in a totally degenerate company. And therefore, Ish Mushchas V'Rosha, V'lo Rak Lavan Atzma L'Kol Anshe HaMokum. And they were teaching Yaakov to live with Lavan, not just Lavan, but his whole community. And I'll prove it to you, says Rabbi Yaakov. Great proof, listen to this. That Lavan, when he made the Mishteh, the wedding feast, he invited all of his community. Not a single person at the whole chasna told Yaakov that his father-in-law is cheating him and is switching the color under the chuppah. The Medrash says even more. They all praised Lavan, what a clever trick. They all laughed at this great deceit. Therefore Yaakov had to absorb a different type of strategy. How are you going to live and survive and maintain the high standards in the company of Rishoim and crooks? That's why he needed the yeshiva of Shem ve'Eva. Last paragraph. That's why Yaakov was not able to listen to the letter of the instruction of his father to go directly to the house of Lavan. Because he was not able to survive there without first going to the yeshiva of Shem ve'Eva. Because he certainly wouldn't be able to go there if he wasn't able to announce the famous line that I've survived and I've kept all the mitzvahs and I wasn't influenced by him. Yitzchak wouldn't want him to go there if he wasn't able to maintain that level. On the contrary, through going to the yeshiva of Shem ve'Eva, I'm actually fulfilling the rotzon of my father. Now let's go back to our moshel. It's like a father who told his son, go buy me a lulav and esrog, l'sukkos. The son said, I'm not such an expert in Daled Minim, let me sit down for a couple of hours and go to the Beis Medrash and just brush up my Hilchas Arba Minim. That's part of the mitzvah of the father. I'm now going to buy the lulav nesrug for my father. It's appropriate for me to go to the Beis Medrash just to brush up my halachas of Daled Minim, and therefore I'm being mekayim the mitzvah of buying Arba Minim properly for my father. Adarabba, who mekayim es hamitzvah b'shleimus avidura, you're doing it in the most beautiful way. V'ilu lo haya oisa kain, lo haya mekayim es kibud avim klal. V'cheinu etzel Yaakov, and so too with Yaakov Avinu. B'li ha'achon ha'miyuchedesh ois t'rushalei et Hashem ve'eva, without the requisite preparation he needed in the yeshiva of Shem ve'eva, lo hayochel lekayim es sivuyiv shel ovel leches lebeis shel Lavan u'lesvivasvai. Beautiful. So says Rabbi Yaakov, how could Yaakov go and learn for 14 years when instructed to go and get married? That's part of the tzivui. He wanted Yaakov to be able to cope and thrive in this environment and be somehow safeguarded and protected from this negative environment. How are you going to do that? You go to the yeshiva of Shem ve'Eva. Because Shem ve'Eva, the two people who survived the degenerate environment and maintained their levels, and that was different to the Torah of Avram and Yitzchak. Anyone who was outside, we just get rid of them. We've got to protect ourselves. We've got to build big, strong walls. So it's a different type of Torah. So there's a very important, a very beautiful idea of Rabbi Yaakov. Okay, two more ideas. So Yaakov eventually gets to the house of Lavan, And we're familiar with the whole story. He marries Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, and he begins building a family. So just two ha'aras regarding the names of two of the Shvatim. The third child born to Yaakov Avinu is, of course, Levi. Reuven, Shimon, Levi. So look at this. It says the Pasuk, V'atahar oid v'ateled ben, and she conceived, Leah conceived again, and she gave birth to a child. V'atoime ato hapam yilova ish elai. Now, my husband will accompany me. Ki yoladti lo shleisha bonim. Because now I've had my share. Al-Kain Korosh Mo Levi. I think Rashi says on the Pasuk that the Imahos were Nevios, and they knew that they were going to have 12 sons, and therefore Leah thought, I've had my share now. That's why with Yehuda it's Hapam Odes Hashem, etc. I've got more than my share, but now my husband's going to accompany me because I've now had my 3 children. Says the Chizkuni, different pshat, amazing pshat. Yilova ish ola elai. My husband's going to accompany me. What does that mean? Look at this. Ad achshov, till now, I've got 2 hands. One's for Reuven and one's for Shimon. How am I going to hold Levi's hand when I'm going to cross the road? Now that I've got a 3rd child, now I need my husband to come and take me to do the rota, to do shopping or whatever, because I need a 3rd hand to help my 3rd child, Levi. That's Pshat Levi. Someone's going to accompany me because I need an extra pair of hands. That's the 3rd Pshat. That's the Chizkuni. Amazing. Now, then Leah has child number 5 after Yehuda is Yisachar. It's interesting, Yisachar is spelt with 2 sins, but yet we will read it Yisachar. If you actually read it as it's written, it should be Yisoschar. And there are different minhagim. If you listen carefully to the Leini on Shabbos, there are different minhagim in different shuls. But I know there's some Bali Korah. The first time it appears in Chumash, they say Yisoschar, and then subsequent times they say Yisachar. It's interesting, the famous sefer, the Bnei Yisoschar. But that's actually how it's written. So take a look. Look at paragraph 4. Vayova Yaakov min hasodeh bo'erev. The background to Yisachar's birth is very enigmatic. Vayova Yaakov min hasodeh bo'erev. He comes home from the field in the evening. V'teitzei Leah likroso, and Leah comes out to greet him. V'tomer elai tovoi, and she says to him that tonight you're going to spend with me. Ki socher scharticha b'dudoi b'ni, because I've hired you, I've bought you with the dudoim, this vegetation, vayishkav b'laylahu, and he lived with her that night. Next pasuk, vayishma lekim Leah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to the tefillah of Leah. Vateled liYaakov ben chamishi, and she gave birth to a 5th child. Vatoyme Leah, nosan elikim schari. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me my reward. Asher nosatza shifchasi leishi, because I gave my shifcha to my husband. Vatikra shema Yisachar. Again, 2 sins, so you should really read it Yisoschar. Now listen to this amazing Das Zakenim. The Das Zakenim Bali HaTosos on the pasuk there, and pasuk Yudches says Yisachar. Yesh by Shnei Shinin. It says shin twice. Why? Achas bishvil mashmois. One is just the simple explanation of the pasuk. The nosen elikim eschari, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me my reward. Va'achas keneged schar scharticha, that I've actually bought you, I've hired you, I've paid my rewards. Shivlosh and Gnai. But that's considered a disparaging way to speak. V'lochein ein a nikras. And therefore, I don't want to highlight the second sin, only the first one. The first one is HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done the Nosna Lekim Eschar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me my reward. So the first sin of Yisachar we pronounce. The second one we don't. Inami, alternatively, Dov Achar mean Mishum Hachi Einikra Lefisha Nitna Leyoiv. Another very interesting pshat. The Pasuk later tells us that there was a descendant of Yisachar called Yoiv. So it says the Das Zakenim, B'nai k'dichsiv b'nei Yisoschar, Oma Yisachar ein Yoiv shem Hogan, v'oisif lo eis achas mishmi v'ikrish mo Yishuv, v'hainu dichsiv b'sei Pinchas li-Yishuv. When you look at the genealogy as stated in the Torah, Yisachar has a child called Yoiv. Now, his bad luck was that they began at the time an Avodah Zarah called Yoiv. Imagine you call your kids, whatever, Jewish name, and then they start a new idolatry called by that name. So Yisachar said, you know what, I've got 2 sins in my name, take one of them, and I'll give it to you, Yov. You'll now be called, you're not Yov, but Yud Shin, Vav Beis, Yoshuv. And therefore, later in Pashas Pinchas, you don't see Yov, he's disappeared, but you see the word Yud Shin Vav Beis. And that's an allusion to this Chazal, which says that Yisachar gave one of his sins to his son Yov to avoid the embarrassment of being called by the name of Avodah Zarah. And therefore, the minhag in Klal Yisrael is not to say Yisachar, but Yisachar, because actually later on he gave one of his sins away, and it is only Yisachar. Amazing. So you've got 2 reasons why Yisachar is commonly pronounced Yisachar as opposed to Yisachar. And one is because the 2 sins, one represents the Nosnan L'Kimeschori, that's good, we pronounce that one. But Schar Schorticha is Lashon Gnai, we don't pronounce that one. And the second reason is because of the Yov. Yov, the sin is added to Yov to sort of take away his embarrassment, and therefore Yisachar loses one of the sins, and therefore the minhag is to pronounce it just Yisachar, not Yisachar. Okay, so there we have it. 4 ideas for tonight. The first idea, Vayeitzei Yaakov Be'er-Sheva Vayelech Harana, Rashi's famous point. He doesn't have to say Vayeitzei Yaakov. So to teach us, She'etzias Hasadik Min HaMokum, Oiseroshim, etc., etc. Says the Kliyaka, but why here? There have been so many Yetzias till now, Avraham and Yitzchak. So he learns it both ways. Way number 1 is to teach us that even though he's left with Avraham and Yitzchak, when they left, they didn't leave anybody, so they made a Roshem. Hashem came when Yaakov left, there was Yitzchak and Rivka still there, so maybe he wouldn't have left a Roshem, Kamashman it does leave a Roshem. And then learning the other way around, on the contrary, with Avraham and Yitzchak, their whole family is left. So there are people behind, they don't care about that. They're not, on the contrary, it's better that they leave. Hashem came when Yaakov left, the people who missed him were tzaddikim. So therefore it made a Roshem. So he learns it both ways. And then the beautiful idea of Yaakov Kamenetsky, how could Yaakov go and learn for 14 years when instructed to go and get married? The teretz is, it's like the moshel he gives, you tell your son to go buy lulav and esrog. So if you stop on the way to brush up on your hilchos lulav and esrog, then it's part of the kibbud aveim. If you go and, watch the football for a few hours, then it's not. So it depends, this was all part of it. And he needed the Torah of Shem Ve'ever because it's that Torah which was very different to the Torah of Avraham and Yitzchak, because it's that Torah which is going to protect him from a negative, evil influence of Lavan in the same way that it protected Shem and Ever and the Dar HaMabal and Dar HaFlogo. And then you have the 2 ideas, the Chizkuni, why Levi is called Levi, that she needed another pair of hands to hold Levi and Yisachar. The 2 reasons that the Das Kenim brings why Yisachar is pronounced that Yisachar as opposed to Yisachar. Okay, we'll leave it there.